interested in all this saga, please, lads, please. We're losing badly right now. We're losing badly. We've been trying to fight 57.2k, and dear Lord, it's gone bad. It's gone bad. We were straddling the line for a month, and then, oh God, we're now way off. Anyway, we're 24 off.
That reaction alone says a lot about where things stand right now. The tone has shifted, and it's no longer quiet discussions behind closed doors. The WNBA has answered the players' latest proposal with what feels like a firm and very public no. And they didn't soften the message. League officials described the demands as unrealistic and warned that agreeing to them could lead to losses reaching into the hundreds of millions of dollars. When talks move from private meeting rooms to public statements, it usually means tension is high. Both sides know fans are watching. Sponsors are watching. Media partners are watching. Every word now carries weight. This is no longer just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about public perception and leverage. From the league's point of view, the financial warning is meant to highlight risk. They are signaling that the current business model cannot absorb the kind of changes the players are asking for without serious consequences. Operating at a loss for a short time is one thing. Committing to a structure that could deepen those losses over several years is something else entirely. That's the concern they are putting front and center. On the other side, players believe the league is growing and that they deserve a bigger share of that progress. Attendance has improved. Television ratings have climbed. Big media deals are now in place. From their perspective, this is the moment to push for better pay, stronger benefits, and long-term security. They see momentum and don't want to settle for less while the spotlight is shining. The real issue is that both arguments can be true at the same time. Growth does not always equal immediate profitability. Increased visibility does not automatically translate into sustainable revenue at the level required to meet every demand. That gap between optimism and financial caution is where the conflict lives. Now that the disagreement is public, the stakes feel higher. Fans may begin to worry about the upcoming season. Sponsors may quietly hope for a quick resolution. And both sides understand that dragging this out could damage the league's image just as it's gaining traction. In most major sports labor disputes, strong words come before compromise. Deadlines force action. Pressure builds. Eventually, a middle ground is found. But at this moment, the message is clear. The distance between the two sides is real, and the path to agreement won't be simple.
I mean this when I say this. I think the players are well within their right to ask for 25%. If we weren't this close to it. Asking for 25% up to 27 when they were already turned down on that, realistically is not going to happen. And I actually don't think that, I don't think in general that the players have to be the one to go to that, to go down. Because let's just say the players go down to 20, which I think somewhere between 20 and 22 it'll get signed off on.
This is where the situation becomes more complex than it first appears. At a glance, the numbers seem simple. The players are now asking for 25% of gross revenue, after starting negotiations at 40%. The league has responded with an offer closer to 17%. On the surface, it looks like a normal back and forth. One side starts high, the other starts lower, and eventually they meet somewhere in the middle. But the real issue lies in what gross revenue actually means within the WNBA's structure. In many major sports leagues, the central office controls most of the money that comes in. That includes national television deals, sponsorships, merchandise, and other shared income streams. From that pool, salaries and other expenses are paid. However, the WNBA operates differently. Its teams are independently owned, which changes how revenue is divided. Out of the total gross revenue generated across the league, only about 42% goes directly to the league office. The remaining 58% flows straight to individual team owners. That money is used for operating costs, arena expenses, staff salaries, travel, marketing, and long-term investments. In other words, more than half of the overall revenue never sits in a central account controlled by the league itself. So when players request 25% of gross revenue, they are not simply asking for a quarter of what the league has in its hands. They are effectively asking for more than half of the portion the league directly manages. That's the key detail that makes this debate more complicated than it sounds. From the players' point of view, they are focusing on total league growth. If overall revenue rises, they believe their share should increase alongside it. Their argument is built on fairness and partnership. They see themselves as the product on the court, the reason fans buy tickets and networks sign deals. Naturally, they want compensation tied to total earnings, not just a limited slice. From the league's perspective, the math feels tighter. If they only control 42% of gross revenue, committing 25% of the total would take up a large share of what they actually manage. That leaves less room for administrative costs, league-wide programs, marketing efforts, and financial stability. This isn't just a disagreement about percentages. It's a structural challenge. Until both sides agree on how revenue should be defined and shared within this system, finding middle ground will remain difficult. The numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Understanding who controls what portion of the money is what truly shapes this negotiation.
Being like, oh, you're on the league side. No. I thought that what the players did was bullshit. The players going on social media, calling their relationship with the WNBA a situationship, going and telling them to write angry emails to Kathy Engelbert. Like, all of that. I do actually think the league have been in the wrong. That being said, there are a lot of situations where the players have been in the wrong. There's a lot of situations.
And that's the critical context that's been missing from a lot of this discussion. First, let's be clear. The players absolutely have the right to negotiate hard. This is their window. The WNBA just experienced arguably the strongest season in its history. Television ratings climbed sharply. Attendance hit record numbers in multiple markets. Media coverage expanded. And rookies like Caitlin Clark brought a surge of national attention that pushed the league into conversations it hadn't consistently been part of before. Momentum matters in business, and the players understand that. When growth is visible, that's typically when labor pushes for structural change. From their perspective, waiting could mean losing leverage. But here's where the strategy becomes more complicated. After the league rejected the 27% proposal, instead of keeping discussions strictly behind closed doors, the tone shifted publicly. Social media posts framed the relationship with the league as a situationship. Fans were encouraged to voice frustration directly to Commissioner Kathy Engelbert. That's no longer just bargaining across a conference table. That's a coordinated public pressure campaign. Public campaigns can work. They can energize supporters, shape media narratives, and apply reputational pressure. In some industries, that kind of strategy forces movement. But professional sports leagues operate differently. Owners are used to public criticism. They've navigated lockouts, strikes, and media storms before. Emotional pressure doesn't always translate into financial concessions. There's also a risk involved. When negotiations become public battles, both sides can dig in. Pride becomes a factor. Messaging replaces compromise. Each statement is crafted not just for the other side, but for fans and sponsors. That environment can slow progress rather than accelerate it. Another concern is perception. If negotiations appear combative, corporate partners may grow cautious. Sponsors typically prefer stability. Broadcast partners value predictability. The league is in a growth phase, and maintaining investor confidence matters just as much as winning public opinion. None of this means the players are wrong to advocate strongly. It simply means strategy matters as much as substance. Aggressive negotiation is expected. Turning it into a public showdown raises the stakes for everyone. The key question now isn't whether players deserve more. It's whether this public pressure approach strengthens their leverage or hardens the league's position. In labor disputes, timing and tone can shape outcomes just as much as the numbers themselves.
Like, it is what it is. But the league going back and instead of giving a counter proposal, immediately going on social media and saying, no, this is unrealistic. Because I'm sorry, like, I get it. The gross revenue number, because of the revenue structure of the league, you're never going to get gross revenue. And the number is a little bit high. And I understand with the revenue structure of the league, the individual people that own smaller bits of the pie, the more money, the larger percentage of players get, the less chance they have of getting any return on their investments. I understand all of that. And is it complete bullshit? Yeah, absolutely.
The league hasn't exactly taken the high road either. Instead of quietly responding with a revised offer behind closed doors, it issued a public statement labeling the players' demands as unrealistic and warning of serious financial losses if those terms were accepted. So now both sides are communicating through press releases and social media instead of sitting down and working through the numbers together. That shift is risky. When negotiations happen in public, it becomes harder for either side to adjust its position without looking like it's backing down. Strong statements create expectations. Once you've told fans and media that something is unacceptable, it's tough to later agree to something close to it without facing criticism. Public messaging can lock both parties into corners they didn't intend to be stuck in. At its core, though, this fight is still about math. Players are asking for a salary cap of $9.5 million per team. The league's offer is about $5.6 million. That's a wide gap, and it explains why tensions are high. But if you look at revenue projections and the current financial structure, the most realistic outcome likely sits somewhere in the middle, around $7.5 million. A cap at that level would represent a major jump from the current structure, which sits in the mid-$1 million to low $4 million range depending on how it's calculated and applied. Moving to $7.5 million would significantly increase team payrolls. It would allow for higher maximum contracts, deeper rosters with better pay, and stronger overall earning potential for players across the league. At the same time, it wouldn't stretch team finances to the breaking point. Owners still need room to cover travel, arena costs, staffing, marketing, and long-term investments. A sustainable model matters, especially for a league that is still building long-term stability. That's why compromise feels inevitable. Neither side is likely to get its opening number. History shows that major sports labor disputes often end with both parties claiming partial wins while quietly accepting concessions. Right now, the rhetoric is loud. But eventually, the numbers will have to line up with reality. And when they do, the middle ground, not the extremes, is usually where deals get done.
Do the league not have some way of kind of countering quick? My hope is that they counter back, because we're now at the stage where the league holding out and not saying anything for 6 weeks because they deem they want the players to have to put in something better is big. I genuinely think this is the way it'll get sorted. League goes to 20%. Players go to 22%. We're good. We're good.
We're not just debating whether the salary cap lands at $7.5 million anymore. The conversation has escalated to something far more serious, whether there will be a season at all. That's the part few people want to say publicly, but it's clearly lingering in the background. If the players strike and games don't happen, the consequences wouldn't just be temporary inconvenience. For a league operating on thin financial margins, a lost season could create structural damage that's difficult to recover from. This isn't about a lack of support or potential. The WNBA has momentum. Attendance is rising. National interest has grown. Media coverage has expanded dramatically. But momentum and profitability are not the same thing. Growth phases are fragile. They depend on continuity, consistency, and fulfilling commitments made to partners and investors. Consider what's at stake. Expansion franchises recently paid around $50 million each to join the league. That's a substantial investment based on projected growth, stable operations, and the expectation of games being played. Ownership groups didn't write those checks for uncertainty. They invested in a functioning, expanding product. Television agreements were negotiated on the assumption that a full slate of games would be delivered. Broadcast partners build programming schedules months in advance. Advertising inventory is sold. Promotional campaigns are planned. If games disappear, networks lose content they paid for. That can lead to financial penalties, strained relationships, and hesitation in future negotiations. Sponsors operate the same way. Companies commit marketing dollars expecting visibility, branding opportunities, and fan engagement tied to live competition. Jersey patches, arena signage, digital campaigns, all of it depends on games happening. If the season stalls, those sponsorship agreements don't deliver the expected return. In a league with massive financial reserves, a single lost season might be painful but survivable. In a league still building toward long-term stability, the risk is much higher. Cash flow interruptions can ripple outward. Investors may pause expansion plans. Sponsors may renegotiate. Media partners may demand protections. Even fan enthusiasm can cool if momentum is interrupted at its peak. That's the uncomfortable reality. A strike is a powerful tool in labor negotiations. It signals unity and leverage. But it also carries risk. Owners can absorb losses longer than most players can, yet owners also have to weigh the damage to franchise valuations and long-term growth. If the season disappears, everyone loses, not just in the short term, but potentially in credibility and future opportunity. This is why deadlines matter. As the calendar moves closer to training camps and opening night, the stakes increase dramatically. It's no longer just about percentages or cap numbers. It's about preserving the foundation of a league that has finally begun to accelerate. The WNBA has real potential. But potential depends on stability. And if games don't happen, the cost could extend far beyond one season's paycheck.
Turn down. It'd be crazy to turn down. And I think this is a huge risk when it comes down to it for the WNBA players, because unlike a lot of other leagues, they have somewhere to go. Like, I hate to say this, but like, if the NBA shuts down, EuroLeague pay so much money that players are going to be making the millions. I mean this when I say this. People think Stewie's going to make $1 million. If Stewie is making more than 100K, like, if Stewie's making more than 100K per game, I would be shocked. Like, as far as I'm aware, in the $1 million contracts, there's been 2 ever. Liz Cambage in China and Diana Taurasi in Russia. As far as I'm aware, for those 7-figure
This is where the balance of power between players and teams becomes more complicated than in other professional sports. In the NBA, when athletes talk about going on strike, team owners understand that those players do not have many realistic options that offer similar pay. Yes, some could join teams in Europe, but even the strongest EuroLeague deals usually do not come close to matching what an NBA player earns, even at the minimum salary level. Because of that, the league often holds more financial control in those situations. The WNBA operates under very different circumstances. Many WNBA athletes already compete overseas during the off-season. They do this because international teams often offer higher salaries than what they receive in the United States. For some players, overseas basketball is not just extra experience, it is a major source of income. For example, one of the league's biggest stars, Breanna Stewart, has reportedly earned around $100,000 for playing only a handful of games in a newer league. That may not compare to NBA contracts worth millions, but it is still meaningful compensation. In fact, the highest international deals can reach 6 figures, and for many athletes, that amount equals or even exceeds what they make in the WNBA. Because of these overseas opportunities, WNBA players may have more flexibility when negotiating contracts or considering collective action. Unlike NBA athletes, they are not completely dependent on one league for their livelihood. This difference changes the financial conversation and gives WNBA players a unique kind of bargaining position that does not exist in quite the same way in men's professional basketball.
To make a couple of $1 million. And she's going to make $2 million maybe for the rest of her career. She's going to stick around the league. She's going to stick around the league. But like, if she goes to Europe, she's making 60K. Like, you look at that where it's like, the league shutting down because again, I'm going to talk about this later, but the league is shutting down. Like, you've even seen it, like No Cap Space basically has said a thing being like, should the WNBA even exist? Because like, is the problem the current revenue structure and should it exist? And I mean this when I say this, like, that is a valid argument. That is a valid argument.
When you look at a dependable rotation player like Emily Ensler, the financial picture becomes much more complex. She may not be the biggest star in the league, but she plays an important role and brings steady value to her team. Under the new collective bargaining agreement that players are pushing for, someone in her position could earn between $300,000 and $400,000 per season. Over the course of an 8-year career, that adds up to several $million. For most people, that kind of income is truly life-changing. It can provide long-term security, support family members, and create opportunities well beyond basketball. However, that opportunity depends on the league remaining strong and stable. If negotiations were to fall apart and the WNBA struggled or even shut down, the financial outlook would look very different. In that case, Emily might need to rely on overseas contracts, where she could earn around $60,000 playing in Europe. That is still respectable pay for a professional athlete, and many players are grateful for those chances. It allows them to continue competing at a high level and maintain their careers. But compared to what she could make in a successful WNBA season, it represents a major drop in income. This creates a very different risk and reward situation than what players face in other professional leagues. In leagues like the NBA, athletes usually do not have an alternative market that pays close to their domestic salary. In the WNBA, international basketball offers a safety net, but it does not fully replace what the league at home could provide if it grows and prospers. For a player like Emily, the decision is not simple. She must weigh the possibility of higher long-term earnings against the risk that negotiations could lead to uncertainty. It becomes a careful calculation about stability, future potential, and how much risk she is willing to take to help push the league forward.
That's it. Get excited for the World Cup. Because if you are a Caitlin Clark fan, you're probably never, you may never see Caitlin Clark play another game of pro basketball again. Like, there is a world where that happens. I don't think it's a likelihood, but I don't think she plays in AU, I don't think she plays in her rivals, and I don't think anyone's going to be able to set up another league in the next, 8 months or so. In the next 8 months to get,
Right now, there is one major factor hanging over the entire situation, and it cannot be ignored. That factor is Caitlin Clark. She is the biggest attraction in women's basketball today, and some would argue she is the most influential player the league has ever seen. Her arrival changed everything. During her rookie season, WNBA broadcasts drew record-breaking audiences, with millions of viewers tuning in to watch her games. Arenas across the country sold out when she came to town. Teams that had struggled for attention suddenly found themselves in the national spotlight. Clark's impact went beyond highlight plays and deep three-pointers. She brought new fans into the league, people who had never watched a WNBA game before. Families, casual sports fans, and even viewers who usually only follow men's basketball started paying attention. For the first time in its history, the WNBA felt like a mainstream sports story instead of a niche product. That surge in attention created real business momentum. Television networks began paying serious money for broadcasting rights. Sponsors lined up to attach their brands to the league. Expansion teams reportedly committed tens of millions of dollars just for the opportunity to join. Investors saw potential. Media coverage increased. social media engagement exploded. Everything pointed upward. But here is the problem: momentum in sports is fragile. It does not sit still and wait for labor disputes to settle. If there is a strike that stretches into the regular season, the excitement built around Clark and the league could fade quickly. Casual fans are not known for patience. They are unlikely to mark their calendars and check back months later to see if games have resumed. Most will simply move on to another sport, another story, or another entertainment option. If that happens, the leverage players currently hold could disappear almost overnight. The higher ratings and sponsorship interest that strengthen their bargaining position depend on consistent visibility. Without games on television and stars on the court, that visibility fades. And when the attention fades, so does the financial argument for dramatic salary increases. The Players Association has taken an aggressive approach on social media, trying to rally public support. Some of that strategy has energized younger fans. However, not every tactic has helped the negotiation process. Framing the relationship between players and the league in casual or dismissive language may gain clicks, but it risks making the situation feel less serious. Encouraging fans to pressure league officials directly can increase tension rather than build compromise. Negotiations require trust, and public attacks often make that harder to achieve. To be fair, the league has not handled everything perfectly either. Publicly labeling the players' proposal as unrealistic without immediately presenting a detailed counteroffer can come across as dismissive. That kind of statement shifts the conversation into the media instead of keeping it at the negotiating table. When both sides begin speaking more to fans than to each other, progress slows down. A realistic solution likely sits somewhere in the middle. If players are asking for 25% of gross revenue and the league is offering 20%, a compromise around 21 or 22% could make sense. That would significantly raise the salary cap, potentially more than tripling it from current levels, while still keeping the league financially stable. Both sides could present the agreement as a victory. Players would earn far more than before, and the league would maintain long-term sustainability. But reaching that middle ground requires humility. It requires the players to recognize that their leverage, while real, may not last forever. It also requires the league to acknowledge that athletes are the reason fans buy tickets and tune in. Underpaying the very people driving growth could damage trust and slow progress. The alternative, a prolonged strike, is risky in ways that differ from other major sports leagues. In leagues like the NBA or NFL, the financial foundation is so strong that everyone assumes games will eventually resume. The WNBA does not yet have that level of security. A lost season could shake investor confidence, disrupt television agreements, and push many players to focus permanently on overseas opportunities. For someone like Caitlin Clark, the financial consequences would likely be limited. She has endorsement deals and international opportunities that provide significant income. But the league itself depends heavily on stars like her. If the structure weakens, hundreds of other players who rely on WNBA salaries and exposure could face uncertain futures. Fans who finally embraced women's professional basketball might lose a league they just began to love. So the central question remains: is the difference between 20% and 25% of revenue worth risking the entire enterprise? Is a higher salary cap worth the possibility of long-term damage? There is no doubt that players deserve increased compensation. Revenues are rising, and those who create value should share in that success. However, wanting more and having the leverage to secure it are not always the same thing. At the moment, both sides seem convinced they hold the stronger position. The league may believe history is on its side. The players may believe public support gives them the upper hand. In reality, both perspectives contain some truth and some overconfidence. Situations like this require calm leadership and practical thinking. Pride and public posturing rarely produce good deals. Ultimately, this is about more than percentages and salary caps. It is about whether the WNBA can turn this historic surge of attention into lasting growth. It is about whether the excitement surrounding Caitlin Clark's rookie season becomes the foundation of a stable future or simply a brief chapter in sports history. Both sides claim they want success. Now the challenge is proving it through action. If compromise comes soon, the league could emerge stronger than ever. If it does not, the cost may be far greater than anyone expects.